Why does poetry matter to you? That's the question that Birmingham-based poet Gabriel Gadfly has been asking people this month, April, which is National Poetry Month. And he's been inviting people to make videos explaining why poetry matters to them, and he's been posting these videos on his blog. And of course, I had to join in on the fun. So, why does poetry matter to me? Well, it's actually because of poetry that I'm a writer today. Now, if you know me well and you are familiar with my writing, that might seem a bit odd because I don't write much poetry today. I'm a writer of creative nonfiction. I am a blogger, I'm an essayist, and I am a freelance journalist. But it all started with poetry. Poetry is my first love, if you will. I think I wrote my first poem when I was about 7 or 8. My best friend was moving away, and we had a fight just before the moving truck was about to pull down the road. So I wrote him a poem apologizing. And I'm sure the phrase roses are red, violets are blue was somewhere on there, and I'm sure it was awful. But I kept at it, and eventually I got better. And I got better mostly because I was reading a lot of poetry. I was reading people like Nikki Giovanni. And I'll never forget the first time I started reading her poems. My heart was beating faster and I got chills because as I was reading her poems, there were all of these thoughts, all of these feelings that I had had for years, and I couldn't articulate them. And there on that page, she had done just that. And when I was reading those things, I felt like I wasn't alone because someone else understood these things that I had been feeling and thinking. Fast forward, and I go to graduate school. And for graduate school, I attend UC Berkeley. And this means that this Alabama girl is in California and nearly 3,000 miles away from everyone I love and everything I know. And I am sure that I'm the only person on campus with a Southern accent. I was so homesick, and I cried nearly every day. I felt so alone. But then I joined a program called Poetry for the People. And Poetry for the People is this program that was started by the late great poet June Jordan. And through this program, we would study poems that typically aren't studied in literature classes, and poetry by different culture groups. So we would study African American poetry, Native American poetry, Asian American poetry, Arab American poetry, just to name a few. And so after being immersed in this literature, we would go out and teach poetry classes to other students at Berkeley. And we also did workshops at high schools in Oakland, and we did poetry readings all over the Bay Area. It was amazing. I loved it. And suddenly, I wasn't so homesick. And so once again, because of poetry, I didn't feel so alone. And so that is why poetry matters to me. Because all my life, it's kept me from feeling alone. And that's how poetry influences my writing today. Because with every essay I write, with every blog post that I publish, I want someone to read my words and think, wow, I thought I was the only person who felt that way. I want someone to read my words and then say, I no longer feel so alone.